Hi, and welcome to another episode of In the Spotlight, where we shine the spotlight on entrepreneurs, innovators, and creatives in industry. I'm Matt Seen, your host. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Bill Karidias. Bill Karidias is the CEO of Spartan Equipment, a cool construction company that Bill's going to tell us all about, and also walk us through his journey. Bill, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Very well, and I'm very pleased to be on your podcast, and I want to thank you for inviting me and Spartan Equipment and the ability to spend some time with you and your audience telling a little bit about the history of not only myself personally, but how I created the brand Spartan Equipment.
I'm really excited to hear your story, and it's quite apt. I know we were talking just before the show went live that I'm actually at the London Construction Build, which is the biggest in the UK. So it's great and timely that we can learn about you and your product, so that I can be an ambassador for you at the show. I'm really excited about that too.
Yes, so Spartan is actually a U.S. based company. We're headquartered in the state of Maryland, not far right from the heart of our government, which is in Washington, D.C. We're about 35 miles north of our nation's capital, where all the power brokers are. However, we have not branched out with our brand specifically outside the shores of the continental United States at this point, and that's been by design of how I've built the company. And what we do is actually offer compact construction equipment attachments. That's the specific niche that Spartan provides. And what that means is there are construction equipment called skid steer loaders, compact track loaders, mini skid steer loaders, and then mini excavators and compact tractors. So what we do is we offer attachments that complement these power plants, as we call it. So most common, laymen are accustomed to the term or brand, I should say, of a bobcat loader.
Yes.
And when I say bobcat loader, even yourself, right?
Mhm.
A lay person that may or may not be acclimated to our industries. Oh, yeah, I know what they are, right? Because they have been the pioneer of this space since 1958. So there were two brothers in Minnesota back in 1958 that had a small manufacturing facility, and they had a need come to them from a turkey farmer. So this turkey farmer came to these two brothers, and they asked, "Hey, can you make a machine to help me clean my stalls?" A very compact area, low overhead clearance. So the two brothers actually started to get to work on a design that eventually was initially a three-wheel dollied unit with an 18 horsepower Kohler gas engine that pivoted on its own axis. And that was the genesis of what we now know as the skid steer loader,
Wow.
which revolutionized the world and construction in various ways. So in 1958, when that launched, it began to quickly morph to a four-wheeled machine by 1960 that also pivoted on its own axis, which was revolutionary. There was not a construction piece of equipment really on the market at that point that had the ability to do that, to turn within its own 360 axis and work in a very compact, confined area with low overhead, margin clearance, and so forth. So that's kind of how it all started. And it really accelerated through the 70s, and by the 90s, the Bobcat loader, which is a brand, right, was the leader of this space. And they have maintained a leadership position for the most part by market share. But now you have all the major brands, Caterpillar, John Deere, Kubota. There's so many brands now that have also created their own offering in this space. So in addition to that, the key for Spartan, and I have to bring this up, is what we call the interface mount. So once the skid steer loader, which was primarily only a lift load carry machine with a bucket on, That was its inception. The conception was to move material with a bucket. Okay, simple. Well, in the 80s, they started coming out with various implements, or what we call attachments: pallet forks, concrete demolition hammers, trencher attachments, sweeper attachments, all these different attachments that really expanded the base and the scope of what a skid steer loader could do and perform in various applications. So now it really took off, and that really started escalating, I would say, in the early 1990s. Well, Bobcat, in their forefront knowledge, in their seeing the future, in the, I believe it was the early 70s, they created what they called their quick attach mounting system, which was a two-lever system that you would quickly disconnect and connect your next implement or attachment within less than a minute. And that was another revolutionary design that Bobcat pioneered, which really made the skid steer loader even more a favorable choice on most every job site because of that. With that said, Bobcat created a patent design on the skid steer universal interface, which kept their clientele loyal to all the other attachments that they started developing and offering on the skid steer loader. Well, by then you had Mustang, New Holland, Case, a lot of other brands come onto the market, actually in the 60s, and they created their own mounting interface system. So they were all vying for market share. And what they did, each brand, by creating their own interface mounting system, was to keep their clientele loyal to their brand because only their attachments would work with their machines. Okay, so now that paints the picture of the first 25-year history of Bobcat's patent, and they won the war because they still maintained over 51% market share in the skid steer industry, even into the early 2000s. Well, by then, their patent ran out. And I believe it was 1998, if my memory serves me correctly, where the interface universal mounting plate system that Bobcat developed and patent expired. Soon as that happened, every major brand, Caterpillar, John Deere, New Holland, Case, Mustang, Gale, they all jumped on to the bandwagon and said, look, if we can't beat them, we got to join them. So they all adopted that universal interface. Well, that created an opportunity for companies like mine, because once I saw that, I saw a golden opportunity to offer implements and attachments now that would work on all brands easily. So I kind of got ahead of myself, but I wanted to lay the foundation for your listeners and your viewers of kind of the space that I'm in and have been in for a very long time. Now, let me go back and tell you a little history of myself in the industry and how I came to create Spartan. In 1989, May specifically, I got my first opportunity as employment as a ditch witch salesman. Now, ditch witch compact equipment also is trenchless or trenching technology, which is where I got my start in the industry as a young man. And I stayed in that space for about 3 years until one of my large clients offered me a job to develop their brands of compact construction equipment in the Baltimore metropolitan area, which is what I did. And that's when I specifically got into the skid steer loader compact construction venue, first with the Toyota brand of skid steer loaders, which the company at the time that I helped develop that brand on the East Coast, we were their number one distributing dealer in the United States. So from there, I rapidly progressed, made a reputation for myself in the compact construction equipment industry. And the company that I had developed that brand for ended up selling to Sunbelt Rentals, and they dissolved my whole division after spending 5 years of taking a division from 500,000 in gross sales to over 15 million in gross sales in our division, with about, I think it was about five of us total, right? Sunbelt said, well, we're not interested in selling equipment. We're a rental company, and they dissolved my division. Well, at that point, the Bobcat dealership had been courting me for years and wanting me to come to be part of Bobcat's dealer distribution here in Baltimore Metro. And that is when I decided to join the Bobcat team. After selling several brands against Bobcat, I, like most other competitive brands, said, well, if you can't beat them, let's join them. So I joined the Bobcat dealer distribution franchise in 1996. And by 1997, I decided that, I had always had the entrepreneurial spirit and I started my own company. So in 1997 is when I started my own company. And my original business model was to sell remanufactured compact construction equipment, specifically the Bobcat brand, because I had known and got to know so much about the brand and it was a leader in the space. So I was remarketing pre-owned compact construction equipment first locally in the Baltimore metro area. And I used print media back then because that's all you had to kind of disseminate your product. So newspaper ads and then trader magazines that were specifically geared towards that type of clientele. Well, by 2000, I noticed that I could sell outside of my local geographical area, say about a 50-mile radius. When I started traversing into other print media outside of my geographical area. So I started getting into Virginia, Delaware, New York, Pennsylvania, and the Carolinas. And I thought, wow, I didn't think I'd be able to sell outside of my normal area until I tried this advertise. So I tried it and it started working. Well, by 2000, that's when the internet and websites really started kind of taking off. And I saw the future immediately. So I leveraged that technology as quickly as I could. And I had my first full-fledged website in the year 2000.
Wow.
That was unheard of in the construction dealer distributing industry. That most of my competitors and other big brands saw what I was doing. They kind of laughed at me. They were like, these guys are never going to buy this stuff on the internet. Well, I said, well, I guess we'll find out. And here we are 25 years
Yeah.
later. And I had the foresight to see the future, which really paid off in spades for my company. And now all those other brands and companies ask me, well, how'd you do it? How do we do it? And it's like, well, it's for me to know and you to figure out now. Remember when you used to laugh at me about how it's never going to work? So that's a quick, accelerated version of my career. But let me get to Spartan now. So Spartan was officially launched January 1st, 2012. And that is the brand I created specifically for just the attachments that complement these machines. In other words, I moved away. I completely changed my business model willfully, which was terrifying because I had built a pretty good business model selling machines. By then, I had developed a parts and service department and even a rental department where I was renting the equipment that I had been buying and reselling. But I had always sold the attachments, and I began to build relationship with a lot of the big manufacturers of the implements and the attachments. Because I had been selling them since 92. In 1992, when I started selling skid steers, I had already been introduced to a lot of the manufacturers that make the implements. So they knew me, I knew them. And I decided that I think the future of profitability and where the real growth is going to be and the opportunity is in the attachment space. The machines are a much heavier lift. You need a lot of support system when you're selling the machines. In other words, anything with a power plant in it, an engine, a hydraulic transmission, a lot of complicated electronics. It's a much heavier lift to start off with a brand including the power plant. So I decided and I elected that the best course of action for me, my future, was to create a brand with the attachments that I could sell to all brands. So that was my thinking. But when I willfully walked away in 2012 from my business model that I had spent all those years building up to that point, the attachment part of my business at that point was only about 50% of my gross annual revenue. So I willfully walked away from 50% of my
Yeah.
company, and it was terrifying. I didn't know if it was the right move at the time, but I made the decision nonetheless. And I can confidently say it was the best decision of my career. My brand took off immediately. And now, just in whatever it's been, since 2012 to this date, we have established ourselves nationwide as a very respected brand of compact construction equipment attachments. So that's kind of a quick, accelerated overview of how Spartan came to be. So I'll kind of let it there, and I'll give you the opportunity to give me some questions for further feedback.
There's quite a lot that's happened over those years, and especially where you've decided to pivot and completely change. I mean, 50% of a business just to let go, that's an awful lot. Talk me through the psychology of that, and how you navigated that change, because for the audience, 50% of you want to retain, and then when you pivot, it tends to be a gradual transition, but you've literally just cut it off at the legs and just gone, right, no, this is the way we're going. So just walk us through the psychology, and what stages and what kind of how you phased into just doing the attachments. That's quite fascinating.
So it's very, I'm going to get into the weeds now with you quickly so that your audience understands why I did what I did. And by the way, my gifting, I'll say, okay, is my ability to see the future. I don't know how I do it. I don't understand how it works in my mind, but that has been the secret sauce to my success. Having the ability to see the future before many others do. Even brands, okay? I'll give you another example. When I was still working as a Bobcat representative selling their products, this was in 1997 that they came out with the first compact rubber track undercarriage skid steer loader. Okay, it was called an 864. That was the model number. And because I was one of their top producing sales professionals nationwide, within the top 5%, they invited me to a field day to test this new machine, to get my feedback, because they knew I was an excellent operator, not just a sales professional. I could run the equipment as well as people that did it for a living. How? Because I was in the field. I used to do construction work to get myself through high school in the 80s. And I had worked in the concrete construction industry. I was a carpenter for a time. So I ran a skid steer loader 1986 when I worked for a contracting company. So, Bobcat saw my skills as an operator and a sales professional as very valuable. So they invited me to this field day. They said, look, I had never seen this machine. They didn't tell me about it. As soon as I saw it, I was like, wow. They're like, get on it and run it. So they had all the engineers there and the designers watching me run this machine. And they had a big pile of debris, dirt, a big pile, probably like 100 tons. And I took this machine initially, and I knew how to push a machine, right? So I pushed it. I put it under severe load. I started digging and making a ramp. Now, when I say a ramp, it was like a 40-degree. I mean, it was going straight up.
Wow.
And I wanted to see, like, I wasn't afraid to turn a machine over, because I knew as an operator, if you stay in the cab, you're safe, right? So I was willing to upset this machine. I was going to push it as hard as I could in front of all these guys, right? So I'm making this ramp. I'm going up and then over and down. And they were like, whoa, like, the engineers were like, hey, tell him to slow down. Like, I was pushing this. I even took it on the side. I wanted to see how much of a side grade this thing would hold
Wow.
before it would go over on its side.
Yeah.
So I took it sideways on this slope. And thank goodness it held, but I was literally putting my right foot down on the cab inside to keep myself from going and hitting the rocks, right? That's how much of an exaggerated grade I had on the side of the hill. So I'm pushing this thing really hard. I get off the hill, and now I start grading with it front and back. And this thing for 20 minutes. And I knew right then, this is going to change the paradigm. There's no going back. I jumped off the machine. And my rep at the time from Bobcat, my regional, what we call our DM, our district manager, his name was Jay Mellon, wonderful guy, friends with him to this day. He says, what do you think? I said, I'll tell you what I think. I said, this is going to change the whole of what we sell. I told them right then that day, I said, within 3 years, we're going to be selling more of these than the rubber tired machines. And they all laughed at me. Even the engineers, they're all their demographic people. They're well, that's pretty aggressive. Now, well, we're not, we don't see that happening. Well, even in the next 5 to 10 years. I said, well, you can say what you want. You're asking me, I'm telling you, within 3 years, 5 years for sure, these things are going to be outselling the skid steers 2 to 1. And I'll never forget it. Within 3 years, I was right. And Jay Mellon reminded me of that years later. He goes, you remember when we had that field day? He goes, you were right and we were all wrong. I said, well, it's good to know that I was right. I wanted to give you that story to tell you how I could see things that other people just can't see. It just clicks in my head. I see it. Now that you kind of understand that about me, I'm going to get back to answering your question about why did you pivot so
Yeah.
hard? And I'll tell you why. Because when I was selling remanufacturers, or what we call pre-owned compact construction equipment, I had built a business model that changed again the industry paradigm. In our industry, when a used piece of equipment gets traded into a dealer, just like a car
Yeah.
dealership, to give you a
Yeah.
parallel, same thing. So you trade a used piece of equipment in. The dealers, they trade them in, they put them in a corner. If they're leaking oil, if the seats are torn, the lights aren't, they really don't put a lot of money into them, right? They don't have a lot of motivation to do that. And I'll tell you why in a minute. So they just let them sit. And if they sell them, they sell them, but they don't really do a good job of remanufacturing. And if they do, and they sell them to another end user, they usually sell them as is, where is, no warranty. Or we'll give you a 30-day warranty, labor only, something like that, right? I saw an opportunity. When I remanufactured a used Bobcat, we went through it from stem to stern. We hand sanded, we painted them back factory, brand new tires. If the seat was torn, new seat, all the lights work, serviced it complete, did all these checks, compression checks, and all the stuff that we did to the machine. And when we were done, they looked as good as a brand new machine that came out of Gwinnett, North Dakota, where they were built. Then I came with this other idea. I started with a 30-day warranty, and I thought, you know what? To gain more profit margin and to really give guys confidence to buy my used Bobcat in Tennessee or Kentucky or wherever, I'm going to give you a 1-year warranty, 100% parts and labor coverage on all the major components. Wow, that was unheard of. Another paradigm shift in the industry. They were like, you're crazy. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Because if I'm going through the machine like I say I am, I should never have to warranty an engine or a transmission or a pump or drive motors if I'm doing my job right. Okay. And in all the years I did that, I never had to warranty an engine, a transmission, or drive motor. Why? Because I was doing what I said I was going to do. And I was putting the money behind, I was putting, feet on what I was offering to my clients. You know,
Holding your feet to the fire,
that
they call
say,
it.
yeah, it's like, you could talk a good game, but you got, put up or shut up. So here, I'm going to give you a 1-year warranty. Now that did two things. It permitted clients to buy from me from other states because it raised their confidence. Like, wow, 1-year warranty? Nobody does that. And it gave me margin. Now I can hold another $2, $3, $4,000 of profit against other guys in the industry or companies that were trying to sell used equipment against me and making a much lower margin yield, right? Why? Because they were selling them as is. They just wanted to turn and burn
Yeah.
them. So that was my business model for many years, and selling the attachments, like I told you, and everything to complement. Well, when the advent of eBay and Craigslist came online,
I remember Craigslist.
it didn't take me long to see, I got a problem. Because now the seller and the buyer, right? You had A, B, and C up until this point. A was the seller or the guy who wanted to trade his used Bobcat into the dealer, right? Then you had B, which was my
Was
company
you?
in the
Yeah.
middle, who would buy all these trade-ins, right? And then you had C that would buy it from B,
The
from
end
me.
user.
So back then, they were hard to find a lot of good used compact construction equipment in one area. It was hard to find them. I had 30 to 50 machines at any given time. So I had a big pool of machines. So, you could come to my company and you'd find something to buy, right? Well, When Craigslist came and eBay, now it was easier for C and A to find each other.
Gap closes.
And now I'm like, I got a problem. Not only are they going to find each other, now that $5,000 to $7,000 profit margin yield is going to go bye-bye. And that's what started happening. So in addition to that, the technology in these machines started changing rapidly. And let me explain that. Bobcat Company and Caterpillar, that was the onset of electronics and electronic diagnosing. Okay, so let me explain in our industry, very different than the automotive industry. The automotive industry back in the 70s, they got hit with a lawsuit that the federal government, or the FTC, I believe, Federal Trade Commission, they enforced a law that was called open source, right? So all the GMs, Chrysler, Dodge, all the major manufacturers that sold cars through a dealer network in the United States, they had to make their product support materials, their diagnostic tools, all that stuff available to third-party mechanic shops. You know, little guys on the corners popping up wanting to do these repairs on these big brands, and they needed the technology, the wherewithal to be able to diagnose and fix the vehicles. Well, that law was passed to permit that behavior to happen. Our industry, however, was exempt. Agricultural equipment and construction equipment was exempt from that law. So what that did is that gave Caterpillar, John Deere, Bobcat, and all the construction companies a closed loop source system. So now to become an independent shop to work on this stuff, it's next to impossible. It was always difficult, but once electronics came online, the electronic diagnoses and the little, what we call the little computer brains that run the machines, it was lights out. It put all the little independent contractors out to where they had proprietary software and specific electronic diagnostic tools that were very expensive to buy, by the way. And you couldn't get one. If you weren't a Bobcat dealer or Caterpillar, you can't get them. You can't get it. Matter of fact, if you did get one, they would come after you and sue you.
Wow.
So that's our industry. I was outside of the dealer loop because when I started my company, I was working on this equipment, remanufacturing and repairing them even. Well, then I saw, this is another problem. Now my service department is at jeopardy. So my sales department's at jeopardy. Now my repair part of the business is at jeopardy because I'm not going to be able to keep up with the technology because they got us locked out. Those two components were okay, I got a problem. And my business model might work for another 3 to 5 years or so, but that's when I said, I'm not going to wait. So it was that foresight, because I knew each year it's going to get harder. That's when I made the decision. I thought, well, what can I do? How am I going to survive? And that's where I studied the attachment industry very carefully. And I knew what my historical numbers were. So I knew exactly how many attachments I sold. I knew what the average cost per attachment was. I did all the math. I mapped all the business. I made a whole new business plan. And I knew exactly how many attachments I would have to sell every month, every week to be able to make up the gain for the 50% of gross sales that I'm walking away from. And it terrified me because I had never done those kind of numbers with attachments. So I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull it off. But I also knew I don't have a choice. So I made the leap hard and fast, 2012. And it was the most terrifying thing I ever did. But like I said earlier, it was the best decision I ever made to this date. And what really helped Spartan get off the ground was in 2013, we landed a government military contract.
That's incredible.
And it was lucrative and it was 3 years long. So it just worked out. It gave me the shot in the arm that I needed to help bolster advertising now, to create a better website, to do all the things that I needed to do to grow fast. And that is what really propelled Spartan the first 3 years, and the rest is history.
Yeah, that's an incredible journey and an incredible story, because what I love is the beauty of when you've seen that and had that foresight to shift with, okay, what's happening out in the world, the macroeconomics. it's important for our audience, especially as entrepreneurs. Some people go, "Oh, I'm not into politics," but you have to watch the tides, and when they change, respond just as you have. When you talked
Yes.
about the industry and on lockdown, it reminded me, because in the facilities management industry, and I remember many years ago when you take over a contract and they've got elevators, they call them elevators, escalators, but you can only go to one manufacturer because they're the only ones that you can get the parts from. So the closed protocol. However, it is getting a lot better now where there's consortiums and some can work on each other's. And that's kind of what what you was telling me about reminded me of. That's an incredible message. And also around the data, being able to know and understand your numbers. That's what's come out of this as well, in terms of if you don't know what you've been doing historically, how are you going to move forward and plan. So that's a great strategy that you've explained there.
And that force fed me really to learn my numbers because I had struggled for the first 15 years to get any lines of credit from a bank. So for the first 10 to 12, well, the first 10 years for sure, I started my company with 40,000 in cash that I was able to be disciplined as a young salesman to save and to be a good steward, right? So that when I started my company in 97, I had 40,000 in the bank. I was a young married guy with young kids, and it was terrifying, but I did it. But I learned quickly about the banking industry in the United States. They only lend money to small entrepreneur or businesses when you don't need the money. Let me say that again so your listeners get it. This is a very important point. Most banks, small, intermediate, especially the large ones, forget it. The large banks, you're wasting your time. If you ever think as an entrepreneur in the United States that you're going to try to get an SBA loan or any type of loan to grow your business, you're going to have to do it on a local basis for the most part. But even then, they don't want to loan you money until you don't need it. In other words, they want a one for one. In other words, if you want a $500,000 loan, well, they want you to have $500,000 in the bank. And it's like, well, what do I need you for? Why am I going to pay you interest if I have my own 500 grand? I don't have 500 grand. I want to grow. That's why I'm coming to you. So here's the game. And this is the game that I learned early on about banking in the United States and launching a business. The way they've structured the game, and I'm convinced it's by design, is that you must do it with impeccable credit that you've managed to assess for yourself personally first. Very important. And you have to do it on credit cards. That's it. That's the only way you're going to get access to capital as a small business person is use your credit cards. So I had about 20 of them.
20.
And I had $180,000 on credit cards in the early 2000s to start buying inventory to build my company, right? Now, the other thing I learned about that industry, now we're talking the credit card industry, is I had no idea that this is how it was stacked. I had a spreadsheet literally that I had made up, the credit card company's name, the account number, my balance, blah, blah, blah. And I've always paid my bills and my vendors early and often. I've never been late in my life on an obligation other than, in this case, the United States Postal Service did not deliver one of my payments via the U.S. Postal Mail Service on time to pay one of my credit cards. It wasn't my fault. It was the U.S. Postal Service's fault. But guess what? The credit card company, they don't care. So they marked me as being late on one of my 20 credit cards. And I didn't realize it for 30 days until I got my bank statement in and I saw a late charge.
Yes.
And I'm like, what? That's impossible. So I called them up. I said, hey, I sent my check. Here's the date. They said, well, we didn't receive it until postmarked this date. I'm like, well, that's not my fault. That's the U.S. We don't care. Okay. So I had been juggling all these cards with interest rates in the 8%, 9%, blah, 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 right? Some as high as 12. Well, this one particular card, they said, okay, according to your statements and your guidelines and the contract we have with you, your rate's going up to 23.9%. I was like, what? And I was like, okay, well, and I figured I'll pay that one off. Well, what I didn't know, and this is important for your listeners to understand about, at least in the United States, these credit card companies, they have collusive behavior. And what I didn't know is once you're late on one card, it triggers an avalanche with all unrelated cards. Like you may have a Capital One card, you may have an Amex card, it doesn't matter. They all figure it out and it triggers an avalanche so that the next month or two, when I started getting my other credit card statements that I was never late on, by the
Yeah.
way, they all started jacking me up to 23.99%. And I'd start calling them like, what do you do? What? I've never been late. Doesn't matter. They said, we saw that you were late on said card, and that's almost collapsed my company because now the interest bearing expense on that 186,000 was putting me under. I was working for the bank. I couldn't make enough profit to cover the margin on the spread in addition to all my other expenses I haven't amassed at that point. So this is a very important point for your listeners to understand. As an entrepreneur, it is not easy. I have been through a lot of scenarios with the banks and building a company. And again, now, they all want to give me money because you succeeded, but getting there is if you don't know your numbers, and I'm getting back to that point, I gave you a long winded answer so that your listeners can understand how analytical I was about. I put a business plan together that was over 328 pages deep. It was a binder. And I gave bankers a roadmap. I mean, a roadmap about how I did what I did to prove to them. Number one, I knew my industry inside. I gave them market demographics. I told them all about my industry, the type of clientele that I sell to, what their behaviors are. I had it all mapped out for them. And even with a business plan like that, 28 pages deep, they wouldn't give me a look. I mean, I was proving to them basically a roadmap. I'm giving you A to Z. I'm going to show you how I'm going to get there. Doesn't matter. But that exercise, having to learn to do all those hoops, jumping over the hoops for the bankers, it did make me a better business owner because it forced me to understand my market, who I wanted to sell to, how much I needed to sell to survive, and of course make a course of action, a roadmap. So in that sense, the banks do force your hand as a small entrepreneur. You better know your stuff. And the more you know your stuff, doesn't guarantee you're going to survive because there's outliers of the economy that could happen that could put you under too. But I think those little golden nuggets are important for your listeners to understand as well.
They really are. And thank you for sharing those. So tell us, is there a piece of advice that you've received that stuck with you over the years? What was it?
Think on that. There's been a lot of pieces of advice, but here's the advice that I think I've always given myself and that I give most often. And I'm not sure if it came through osmosis, through my life's experiences with many, brilliant people and all the learning that I've tried to amass as an owner, going through experientially and also being taught. But I would say this: being selfless, listen carefully, being selfless and not selfish when it comes to your company and what your company is all about, it doesn't matter, right? Whether you're a restaurateur, a construction equipment manufacturer, a hair salon, it doesn't matter. This principle is golden and it applies. If you can become selfless, right, and not selfish, now here's the golden nugget. That means you're putting your potential clientele's needs, right, wants ahead of your own. That one piece of golden nugget, I think, has probably served me better than any other principle because what it does is it diminishes your focus and your obsession with self-aggrandizement, self-enriching. If that is what you do as an owner or a professional or even an employee, you're never going to succeed. You're never going to be what I call a one percenter. You won't. If you're thinking about the commission that you're going to earn while you're negotiating, I don't care what it is you sell or what product or service you offer. If that's your thinking in the basis of your brain and in whether you are aware of it or not, this is where a lot of sales professionals fail. They don't even realize they're doing it, but they're already front loading. Wow, I'm going to hold 32% on this deal or 42. They're thinking about themselves first. It's human nature. It is. I get it. But if you can train your brain to reverse that thinking and be cognizant while you're negotiating. Okay, let me give you a great
Yeah.
example. If you came to me and you said, Bill, I got 23 acres of property, I need to clear this land. What's the best attachment for me? Right? I could steer you in any direction I want. Trust me. I could put you in a $48,000 mulching attachment, which would yield me a lot more profit and percentage of margin for myself. Or I could properly advise you once I see the saplings and the landscaping and what you need, and say, you know what, you only need a $4,800 brush mower. You see my
Yeah.
point? That's the key to honestly advise or have your client's best interests at heart. There it is.
That's priceless. That's priceless. What I've noticed, Bill, is in life and with my own entrepreneurial journey, is that when you start to think and you give, whether it's advice, whether it's a referral, whatever that is, not expecting to receive, that's also part of that selflessness. So sometimes I'll have someone that's very money oriented and be like, how much are you making on this? What are you doing about? And I'm just like, it doesn't even enter my mind. And then I question, well, in terms of sales, should it? But you're absolutely right. It's that innate selflessness, say that correctly, that drives my vision, that just drives me as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So the addendum to that is the cream will always rise to the top.
Mm,
So if you're a human being or a professional that behaves in this manner, it's a principle. It's called the law of reciprocity,
mm,
right? You give, and eventually the harvest will come. But sometimes you have to be patient because the harvest may not come in the timing with which you think it should. And that's where you get discouraged. You let impatience rule the day, and that's where you fail. You have to be in it for the long game. Keep hammering away with the hammer and the chisel every day. Put the principle in practice, and eventually, trust me, as someone who's lived this way and who's built a nationwide brand with this mentality, you will rise to the top. Why? Because your clients will reciprocate in ways you cannot imagine through referrals, because you're building such trust. Once they realize that you are genuinely concerned about their needs, and that you're advising them, this goes for doctors, lawyers, I don't care what you're doing. I've seen doctors poorly behave in ways of advising me about a surgery or this or that I know their motive is to self-enrich themselves.
mm.
That's terrible behavior. And eventually the money will come. If you put this principle into practice, trust me, it will come back to you in spades, but you have to be disciplined. And here's where the rubber hits the road. I had a contractor back in the 90s who wanted me to technically violate the laws of the state of Maryland.
Wow.
He wanted me to sell him a 580 case backhoe, which was a big sale for me back then, a big tractor loader backhoe. And he was based in Jessup, Maryland. But he said, I don't want to pay the Maryland state sales tax, because the way the law is written in the state of Maryland is you have to charge sales tax duty on any vehicle, product, it doesn't matter. If it's sold and delivered within the state of Maryland, you have to charge sales tax duty unless they have some type of tax exemption, like farm use or whatever. But then they have to prove it. They have to give you a number, fill out a form. Okay. This guy had none of that. He was just a contractor. He says, so what I want you to do to avoid the sales tax is I want you to deliver it in Delaware, where there is no sales tax duty. Just drop it over there and we'll pick it up and bring it back to our shop. That technically violates the law. And I knew it. And I really needed this sale. I was struggling as a young guy. I was having a bad month or two in a row. I really want to hammer this point home, because this is when it matters. Okay. When the rubber hits the road, and this is when this kind of discipline that will serve your life well as a person, as an entrepreneur, I don't care. It's these times when you're at that crossroad of making a decision that is legal, moral, and ethical, right? That's another thing that I always try to teach anyone that works with me or around me, my employees. If we can't do a deal and it's legal, moral, and ethical, we're not going to do
And
it.
get
We're
done.
going to walk away. And sometimes it's hard when you really need, and I needed it. But I told the guy, I said, I can't do it. He goes, well, if you don't do it, I'm just going to go to so and so dealer and buy their backhoe. I'm like, well, then you do what you got to do, sir. But I'm not going to do it. And that's what I'm talking about. That's when these principles matter most. That's when your salt is tested, right? And when you can do it, then it becomes easier to do it otherwise.
Yeah, it's so true. Coming from a procurement background as well as operational, and it's the first thing, integrity and your ethics, and especially when there's a supplier that, when I was on the other side, the supplier wants to get in with you. They're offering you. We even had not bribe, gift trackers to say, oh, what you're offered, and you report on those things, and it was just like, no, it's your own personal integrity, and your reputation's at stake as well, so it's super important.
That reminds me of another big issue. Procurement officer with the city of Baltimore. It was my largest account when I was a Bobcat representative. I mean, they had hundreds and hundreds of machines, but they would have to formally put it out to bid and get three bids. And this procurement officer, he said, look, if you want me to guarantee that you get this contract, you got to give me a perpetuity, basically, right? And I was like, ain't gonna happen, dude. I mean, and this guy was the largest procurement officer for the city of Baltimore, and I know he was doing it with police vehicles, trucks, trash truck, everything, right? But he brought that to me, and it put me in a really bad spot. But again, it's those kind of decisions in life that are going to separate, in my opinion, those who are ultimately winners. Whether you win in business or not, you win as a human being. And I don't care what you tell me. At the end of the day, if that doesn't matter most to you, then you're not a professional. And you'll never succeed ultimately as such, whether you remain yourself as an employee or you want to step out and become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's true. Integrity first, every time, every time. So tell us, tell us what's in store for you for the next 5 years. Are you gonna take the business offshore? Are you gonna stay nationwide? Are there new product innovations with technology advancements that you're thinking of?
At this point, right now, I have no plans to go offshore. And there's a lot of logistic reasons why that becomes very complicated. And now, in this new tariff environment, it adds many more layers of hurdles potentially. But shipping, moving this type of equipment around through seafaring ships and crossing borders, and it's very complicated and it's very expensive. So it becomes very prohibitive to do so. So I don't see in the next near 5 to 10 years me wanting to do that unless something changes that makes it easier, and maybe I will. But at this point, no. As far as product innovation and technology, I'm constantly working with our manufacturers as they ask me for feedback, and I'm always offering them ideas when an idea arises. In other words, here's the genesis of an idea. An end user comes to you with a complaint or a problem that they need to solve on a job site, say, right? There's just not an attachment yet that can handle this application. Well, there it is. Now you have a genesis idea. Can we make an attachment to fit and solve this problem? So that's how it usually goes. So we're always looking for those opportunities, and we let the end user bring them to us, right? Because it's kind of hard to think through every scenario because they're the ones out there doing stuff. So they come to us and say, hey, is there an attachment to do this? And if there is, of course, we offer it to them. But if there's not, then we go to engineering and say, hey, what's the potential of trying to create something? So there's always that in our industry. And companies that address those problems and solve those problems are the ones who get to make the margin. Unfortunately, when I started in this industry 30 some years ago, the yield curve of maintaining profitability on that new idea would last 10 years, sometimes longer, because of technology back then and the pace at which it moved. Fast forward to today, you come up with that new idea, you patent that idea, okay? Doesn't matter anymore. And here's why. You have bad actors that have been permitted to perform and behave in our industry. And here it is, the Chinese. The Chinese have been playing dirty pool in our industry now for 15 to 20 years. They buy our products. It could be machines, it could be and they They ship them back to China. They reverse engineer them. They make them with subpar grade products and steel, and then they re-import them into our country at a fraction of the cost. So now they're stealing our intellectual property rights. This is nothing new. It's happening with our military hardware. I mean, you hear about it. You've been hearing
Yeah,
about it.
yeah,
Well, it's a real problem in our industry, and it has been now. And there, you can't chase them. It's hard to find them, right? And when you're dealing with international law, it becomes clumsy.
mm,
So, I've been trying to build a coalition now for a number of years to get our government involved to try to put a stop to this. And, with what the current administration is doing with tariffs and all, it could cause some slowdown and hurdles, but ultimately something needs to be done to try to stop companies, I mean, nations like China and others, but China is probably the biggest bad actor in how they behave. So, yeah, it's a problem. But now your window is like 2 to 3 years.
yeah,
Yeah, you come up with that idea. Now the Chinese, they copy it. They knock it off. They bring it in. They push them through Ritchie Brothers auctions. Is a lot of way of how because they have no dealer network. So a lot of times they'll push it through the auctioneers, which in my opinion, those auctioneers are betraying our country. And that's another sore point for me.
mm,
Trying to build a coalition and maybe get our government to go after these auctioneers that are permitting these products that are violating patents and so forth to be sold through their auctions.
yeah, yeah. It's a long again. It's just as growing the business. The new ideas is a long game. Again, that's something that is going to take time to, if ever, to resolve.
Yeah,
I was going to so let's
yeah.
just talk a bit about your work-life balance because it sounds like you're a very busy man. So how do you what do you do to maintain your work-life balance, Bill?
I've, for the last 25 months, made a conscious decision that I have to put more focus back on my health. So I came up with a plan. I have a concierge doctor that I consult with, and I used to be, an athlete as a young man. I did bodybuilding, so I have a good foundation to build off of, right? But building a company and a family over the last 25 years, it's taken its toll on me physically to the point where I had ballooned up 100 and some pounds, right, over my target weight. And I've had 5 knee surgeries now from playing football and damaging my knees, and so I made a conscious decision 25 months ago, and right now I'm heading towards my goal. I'm turning 60 December 12th, and I wanted to hit my goal weight by then. I'm 16 pounds away, so I've lost 72 pounds in the last 25 months. I'm back in a gym, strength training again, and I'm making the commitment to make sure I'm around, because if I'm around, I'm the key man right now, right? I have other employees now that day to day kind of manage the business and all the heavy lifting because I've trained them to do so. But I have at this point in my life made it a point to come in later and leave earlier by design, to get in the gym, to make sure I'm focusing on my health. And I have been doing that. And I've always been very dedicated to my family. But, building a company, it's no small task. And, it has taken its toll at times, but I've made the decision consciously that no, I'm going to have to make sure that I, like you say, that divide and conquer both areas. And I've been making a conscious effort now for over 2 years in doing so, and it's paying off. I just had my blood work come back yesterday, actually, again, and a lot of my markers are, my internal functions, as I'm being told, is that of a man now between the age of 30 and 40.
It's
So
it's
my
working.
liver function, my kidneys are like a 30 or 40 years. So I'm heading in the right direction. So to kind of answer that question, I think that's kind of been my commitment now to better answer you, that work-life balance. Because I try to be a very aware person and very conscientious, right? And in addition to the physical health, I've changed paradoxically in my mind. And I have been training my mind now for over 2 years to live in the present. You would not believe how hard it is to do that,
Very hard.
because we tend as a species to live in the past or to live in the future, and our mind is obsessed with that. As a human species, I've done a lot of kind of aware study and understanding of how the mind works to understand how you can change the mind and how it functions, but to become an aware person to live in the present today. In other words, I can't change yesterday. So, not that I don't want to learn from yesterday. So, there is a balance there. I don't want to totally forget yesterday, but for the most part, I'm going to forget yesterday. It's done. Can't get it back. But I'll wean from it so that I can learn from my past experience. I think the bigger concern for most humans is the future, because that's what stresses us out. My bills, how am I going to make it? What if this happens? What if that happens? Well, what if I get hit? My house gets hit with a tornado, or, our mind will go into a loop, and then it paralyzes you and you can't do anything. So I have come to the understanding of the way the mind works with these two respects. And I try to live for today and be very present in today. I'm very task oriented. Like, what do I want to accomplish today? But then, of course, I plan for the future. You can't not have an action plan. But the difference is you can't be obsessed with the future to the point where you're motivated by fear. That's the biggest learning curve that I have as a human being and as an owner. I think that has helped me the most in the last 3 years is my journey in understanding and extinguishing fear. What kind of fear? All kinds of fear. Fear of tomorrow, fear of what might happen, fear of the economy, fear of my relationships might fail. If you can learn how to overcome fear in all aspects, and I have coached a number of people over the years with panic attack disorder and helping them, because I suffered from that as a young man in my 20s and in my 30s, but I learned how to manage it. And now I help others with the same condition. And really it comes down to, in my humble opinion, panic attack disorder, the foundation of it is ultimately the fear of death. I'm convinced of it. Now, I can't prove it. I don't know if there's any empirical studies that can prove that point, but I have over the years counseled many people with panic attack disorder and have taught them that the root cause, when you break it all down, like, why are you freaking out right now? Why? Because your mind is saying, and your adrenal glands are firing and your heart's pounding and you're getting shortness of breath and you're hyperventilating. Why? Because your body's in a fight or flight response right now, and ultimately it thinks you're going to perish the earth. That's it. You think you're going to die. Okay, once we understand that that is the root cause, now we can work backwards from that. So when you're in that state, I call it talking yourself off the ledge. I used to put myself through a mental gymnastics, and I'd say, okay, well, I know what this is. First, I'm recognizing it. I'm not dying. My heart is strong as a horse, right? I had my checkup. I'm good. So I know it's not that. And then you start walking backwards. Okay, what's really causing this? Oh, I know what it is. It's that issue with my air conditioning in my house that failed. When you start thinking it through, you'll figure out what's causing that, what triggered the panic attack at that point. But ultimately, what is a panic attack at its root genesis is the fear of death. Ultimately, that's it. Once you understand that and learn how to address it, you're on your way to a healthier, happier experience in overcoming that.
That's a really interesting analogy. And as an entrepreneur, what would you say to a young person in their 20s now thinking of a career, an entrepreneur in construction? What piece of advice would you give them?
So the opportunities in our space still are endless, and I'll tell you why. And I've been saying it for over 25 years. Robots may at some point begin to solve some of the manual labor issues that still exist. Machinery, especially compact construction machinery, right? Micro mini excavators and mini skid steers have gotten so compact now that they have solved a lot of the manual labor issues in tight confined areas where you needed a man with a pick and a shovel. Well, now we have machines that can work in those spaces. So it is addressing some of the manual labor. What it's not addressing, though, is HVAC contractors, electricians, plumbers, where you're in crawl spaces and you have to do all this manipulation and thinking at the same time. I don't see robots solving that yet in the next 15 to 20 years. They may, but I think for 15 to 20 years at minimum, there's a lot of opportunity in the trades. So that's where I'm encouraging young men and women here in the United States as Mike Rowe has been doing. And I know Mike Rowe personally. I used to work out with him at a gym in Timonium, Maryland back in the
Yeah.
80s, right? And I watched his rise and ascent, and I support his causes as much as I can to bring the trades back into the schools and to bring trades to the forefront, because I've been saying, and now it's starting to happen, for 20 years, the computer program people, they're going to be making 35,000 a year, and the HVAC mechanical engineers and the electrician, they're going to be making 350,000 a year. And it's coming like a freight train. So I saw it again. This is one of those things I saw a long time ago, where white collar jobs were the rule of the day. Go to college, get a 4-year degree, and now you're seeing a collapse quickly. It's happening quickly. Every day you hear about AI killing entry level jobs. You don't need programmers. You don't need, all those white collar jobs where you were making 150, 200 grand. They're dying on the vine quickly, quickly. So now the blue collar opportunity, if you can get over the hurdle of the stigma, which is going to change, by the
Yes,
way,
it is.
because once a mechanical contractor is making 350 grand a year, every parent's going to say, son, you need to go to HVAC school, right? Then it's going to be a badge of honor. But we're not there yet, but we will get there in the next 5
Yeah.
years. I'm saying it now. So then that's going to shift. So that's what I would say to the young people in their 20s. Forget 4-year college. Look at trades. If you want viable career for the next 20 years or more, consider the trades, because your opportunities right now are endless.
That's some really great advice. I was thinking when you were talking that they have in the UK, they actually have and are encouraging the STEM colleges, because as in the US, there is a shortage and it can only be stemmed by people going and getting that type of education, that practical education in terms of they call it the hard services over here. So yeah,
So they need to start, governments and municipalities and schools and college, they need to all pivot. They need to start giving scholarships now, not on academia coming out of high school, right? I mean, they're still going to do that regardless. But they need to start changing the paradigm in their thinking and start offering scholarships to encourage these people to get over the hurdle of, I don't want to be a plumber. I don't want. Well, if you get your education for free and you're on the job learning and getting paid for 2 years, you're getting paid to learn, to go to school. That's where we got to start thinking, because this problem is systemic. Because here's what's going to happen. It's going to happen in Europe. It's going to happen here. You're going to be a homeowner, and it's going to be Thanksgiving Eve. Let me paint a mural for you. And you got 40 people scheduled to come to your house tomorrow. You've spent $1,000 on food. You've been up all night cooking your meals, getting ready for all your friends and family that are coming out of town. And all of a sudden, you're in your kitchen, and on your kitchen countertop in your beautiful home, you see water dripping. You look up, my goodness, where is that coming from? You go up to the master suite above you, the bathroom, somewhere there's a leak. Now you got a problem. So what do? You call 1-800-plumber. And the plumbing service says, well, we have 24-hour service that we can come out and fix you. But it's $1,850 US for us to first come there. Then it's $625 every 15 minutes while we're there to fix it. You see where I'm going with this? And I'm telling you, it's going to happen. I'm telling you, like I've told you, I can see the future. I see it. It's going to happen. And when it gets to that point, and the US citizens, or in your country, in the UK, when they get a $4,700 bill to fix a leaking plumbing issue, they're going to say, oh my God, when it's going to shift. And that's when it's going to accelerate. And that's when everybody's going to, this is a problem. We got to get more bodies that know how to do this stuff. Not only that, think about the transportation industry. You need mechanics to fix diesel engines and this and that and then once EVs take over, so what? You're still going to need technicians. So this problem is systemic. It's terrifying. And a person like me that understands it, I've been seeing it come for 30 years, and it's terrifying because I know it's coming. And when that starts happening, and people are going to be having to spend a month's worth of salary to fix a mechanical or electrical issue, it's going to
mm,
change.
that in the facilities management industry for many, many years, we talk about the preventive and the reactive. And we have clients that are reactive, and oh no, let's run it to the ground until it breaks and then we'll fix it. As
Correct.
opposed to
Yep.
actually, guys, if you just get a preventive maintenance contract, it's gonna cost you less in the long run, not more. And so that is still happening. It's still prevalent in our industry where they don't.
Well, let me take it a step further, right in that vein. Let me tell you how else it's going to go, because you're hitting on the other part of the equation that I already see starting to happen. So I am a preventative maintenance nightmare. I mean, I'm the guy who I'm contingent. I have a 40 kW generator sitting behind me at my dealership. I have one at my house. I get them serviced twice a year. I'm that guy. Like, power goes off,
Bam,
30 seconds
it's
later,
me.
we're up and running. Bob, right? I'm that guy, right? So now I made a contract with my electrician, because here's the other flip side to what you're saying. Contractors are going to say, if you're going to be my tier one client, you're going to have to commit to this contract, whether you need it or not. You know, if you want me to put you in the top tier of response, you're going to have to pay me whether you need it or not. That's the other part of this equation that's coming. So that if you're not willing as a consumer, I don't care if you're a business, a government agency, or an end user, if you're not willing to make that investment up front, guess what? When you're on Thanksgiving Eve and you call that guy and he says, you're not on my tier one, I can't come out to you. Well, when can you come to me?
40.
6 weeks, 6 weeks from now, right? I mean, I'm telling you, this is how bad it's going to get. 6 weeks. Well, what am I supposed to? I don't know what you're going to do. You should have been a preventative maintenance on our tier one contract. That's what's also going to help force this issue quicker, because contractors are already figuring this out. Because if you want me to respond to you promptly, you got to pay to play. And you're going to have to pay more handsomely as this problem exasperates itself. But that's also going to help push this issue to the forefront once people realize, oh my gosh, I better do this or else.
Yeah, some of our critical industry, especially when it's around data centers and critical systems, it's like a 1 hour, 2 hour responses. But yes, they're going to cost more than your standard. Our standard these days in our is like 4 hour is your standard response. Anything as a what they call priority threes or fours, then they're 5 days, 7 days. But it's really interesting how the industry is shifting, and the client perception. Clients are more responsive now to the preventive, but it's taking time for that shift to happen. It really is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's nothing that forces humans to change their behavior more than a painful event. Pain is the number one motivator to the human species. Until we feel pain or loss, that's the other
Yeah.
motivator. I lost a spouse. I lost my wife. I lost my marriage. I lost my business. It's those two things that will motivate the human species more than any other thing. Even if I told you, I'll give you $1,000,000 if you do this, I can prove it to you. If I caused you immediate pain, that would change your behavior more than any other motivator.
Yeah, you're so right. Just reminded me many years ago when I was operational in the field, and one of the landlord buildings, the chiller. We knew that the chiller was gonna die at some point, but the landlord wasn't. They were just delaying, and then very hot summer. We had an unusual hot summer, and everyone temporary units are coming in, air fans are on, and in the end, yes, guess what? We had to spend the money and replace the chiller. So, but you're right, changes behavior.
And usually you spend 1.5 to 2 times more in that scenario. It's just a defect in the human species to want to delay the inevitable pain. If we perceive it as pain, which in these scenarios we're talking about, that's how the brain perceives it. Like, oh man, I don't want to deal with that. I want to have fun. I want my endorphins to fire off in a good way. We don't live in a linear existence. So the sooner you can understand that there are catastrophic events that not are they going to, or maybe they will happen. And as long you can't mitigate them all, but the more you can mitigate, ultimately, the happier your existence will be because you're prepared. And it's the way it is. And the sooner you, as a business owner, or as an individual, recognize these patterns that are in the cosmos. It's the rule, these are laws that have been enacted that we have no control of. Case in point, a hurricane could come through your community. You can't control that. You can't predict it, but you can build a house that can withstand a Cat 3. You can do that. Oh, but that costs 3 times more. I don't give a shit. Excuse my French. Do you want to survive or not?
Yeah.
Is it an investment that you're willing to make or not? So it's that kind of thinking that I carry through every rung and level of what I do and how I do it in running my business and advising those around me to try to think that way, because it will lighten the load ultimately. But it takes a lot of discipline. And I hate to say it, that discipline has waned because technology has retarded our ability to be disciplined. It's immediacy. We want instant gratification. And with these principles that you and I are talking
Mm.
about, there is no
No.
immediacy and there is no gratification immediately, which is why the younger generation have a harder time understanding and implementing these principles that you and I both agree no will serve you best. But because they are conditioned through instant gratification, their minds are being programmed like
No,
it's
no,
they're
no.
it's firing constantly, which sears in the human brain a certain pattern of behavior, and then it becomes almost impossible to change the brain's thinking with regards, because you're addicted to instantaneous gratification and dopamine hits. So for me to try to teach you to put these practices into place as a Gen X person, it's even that more difficult because they don't understand. It's like you're talking a foreign language.
Yeah.
Like, no, I ain't doing that.
Take
It's
too
like, well,
long.
you're gonna do it. It's just a matter of when, right? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Bill, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today and learning all about your history, about your industry, about your journey. For our audience, in the spotlight shines light, and it's a platform where we share others' journeys and experiences for you to learn and grow. Are there any last words from you, Bill, before we end the show?
Well, I would say, first of all, I thank you for the opportunity not only to get to know you as another sentient, loving human being. I do appreciate the privilege to spend time with you and your audience. But to your audience, I would say the world right now, I think, is in a crosshair, a stressor. The human species, I think, is at great peril and risk for a number of reasons. But I think the paramount reason is that we have bought into this narrative of those that we don't know, or more importantly, don't always agree with. We have let fear of one another rule the day. And this will be the peril, I think, of the human species more than global warming or any other issue. We are self cannibalizing our species by this visceral behavior, these base instincts of fear of what we don't understand about each other, or more importantly, aren't willing to understand. So I would say to everyone, let's back it down a lot. Be more willing to listen to others, and more importantly, be willing to dialogue civilly about our ideas and what our life's journey is about to help each other. And I hope that this podcast today that you and I have shared will help the listeners to do that.
Bill, thank you so much. Everyone, this has been another episode of In the Spotlight with Bill Karidias. Until next time, stay blessed. Thank you all.
Thank you.